Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO, on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp. is a Canadian-based mineral exploration project generator. The company currently holds multiple property interests in Ontario with joint venture partners and is seeking further joint venture partners for other drill-ready properties in our portfolio. For more information, please visit our website at rmroyalty.com or call me at 604-922-2030.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Jordan Bateman, Communications Director for the Independent Contractors and Business Association. Welcome back to the show, Jordan.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Jordan, the mayor of Surrey and his council have voted to stop building their light rail transit system and instead go with what everybody calls the proven track of SkyTrain in the Lower Mainland. Is that a good decision on his part? Because it seems to me by building it out to Langley, you've opened the way for rapid transit all the way down the Fraser Valley.
Yeah, there's been a lot of debate over the years between LRT and SkyTrain, and one of the ideas of why LRT would be better is it was cheaper to build because you don't have to elevate the guideway, and you've got fairly wide boulevards in a lot of places in Surrey that's already owned by the city, so there isn't the same kind of land acquisition costs. But as the budget estimates have come in, and as TransLink's done their number crunching for whatever reason, and certainly it colored me skeptical of most of what TransLink does, but for whatever reason, the cost savings really wasn't there between LRT and SkyTrain. So, when we thought LRT was going to cost 40% of SkyTrain, well, that means you can go, 2.5 times further. It seems more like 75 or 80% of SkyTrain, in which case, just for the sake of the uniformity of the system, you're probably better off to go with a slightly shorter SkyTrain route rather than the LRT. So, it was interesting in the Surrey election to watch Doug McCallum come out so forcefully and say SkyTrain, absolutely no LRT. And then slowly over the campaign, as it became clear that he had found the public pulse on this, you saw Surrey First and Bruce Hayne, the two other Tom Gill and Bruce Hayne, the two other folks, sitting councillors who had voted repeatedly for LRT, even they began to hedge a little bit and say, maybe we should pause LRT, maybe we should review it, maybe we should take one more look at SkyTrain. So it's pretty clear that the will of the people have said, go for SkyTrain. Now, though, the ball's really in John Horgan's court. Will he step up and fund that a little bit more?
Well, something that nobody's talked about is the operating cost. SkyTrain doesn't have drivers. LRT would have to have people at the wheel. Isn't labor one of your biggest costs of operating a transit system?
Yeah, labor is a big cost. Conversely, though, at grade, light rail would be cheaper to maintain than the giant guideways overhead. So, there's kind of pluses and minuses, but that's part of the overall, factored in cost on this. Going back to Horgan, I'm really curious what John Horgan will do here, because Surrey has 4 swing ridings, if you include Delta North, that he picked off from the Liberals in the last campaign. That got them close enough to the point where they could cut the deal with the Greens and form government. He can't afford to lose any of those Surrey ridings. Certainly can't afford to lose 2 of them or 3 of them or even, heaven forbid for the lefties, all 4. So, my sense is he's going to bluster and sputter and whine and complain about, the mayors changing their mind and McCallum flipping. But in the end, I think the provincial government's probably got to come to the table with more money for SkyTrain there, simply because they cannot afford to hand over those ridings to the BC Liberals.
Didn't polls and surveys also find that the people of Surrey themselves said only something like 3% said they would use light rail, whereas all of them, a huge majority, said if we had a chance to have a SkyTrain near us, we'd use it?
Yeah, light rail, it really is a different beast. So light rail is about moving people within your community. It's like a kind of a more permanent, more glamorous, if you will, bus system. Whereas SkyTrain is really about moving people, regionally throughout, obviously from, Surrey to New West and then into Burnaby and downtown. two very different kind of mindsets when you use those systems. But look, the people have sort of spoken. I think it's very clear. I was pleasantly surprised to see a mayor like Doug McCallum jump in on night one, inaugural meeting, which is usually just ceremony and pomp and circumstance. Not for his council. They got down right to work and announced or voted and made sure that Translink knew that they wanted to move to SkyTrain and also to form this Surrey City Police Force. So they're getting to work right away. For John Horgan, he gets one of two choices: fund it or get left at the station.
The only other politician I've seen work that fast is Grant Devine in Saskatchewan. He promised when he was running for the Conservatives back in, I think it was 1980, he said, if I'm elected, I'll remove the gasoline tax and guarantee farm loans and mortgages at what at then was an amazingly low rate of 11%. And as he was being sworn in, he said, effective midnight, your mortgage is guaranteed and the gasoline tax is removed. And I went, I've never seen a politician follow up on promises that fast, but it looks like Mayor McCallum in Surrey has acted as fast as he could the very first council meeting. Is that the way politicians really should be? If they promise something, come through with it. Don't dilly-daddle afterwards and say, well, we have to study. Because the NDP right now has promised so many things, and then they say afterwards, oh, we have to study it. Didn't you have how many a dozen years in opposition to study stuff?
16 years.
16 years, yeah.
And it's funny you should say that because, I kind of thought maybe McCallum would hedge a little bit, especially on the Surrey Police Force, right? Like, get in there and then, maybe week one announce, we're going to do a feasibility study. We want to know what the costs are, moving over to our own system and the steps. No. They're skipping all that. They're going directly to, directing staff. We are doing this. Let's get on with it. Kind of exciting. The BC Liberals in 2001, the new era, the first 90 days, there was a lot of action. There was the income tax cut within a few days of Gordon Campbell taking office. I think the guy to watch, if he wins the next election in Alberta, is Jason Kenney. I've heard Jason Kenney speak a couple of times in the past year, and this is someone who has a very aggressive plan, wants to get going on day one. It wouldn't surprise me if he remembers that Grant Devine model and it really goes aggressively in those first few weeks of being in office.
Well, I think if you look at what's happening with elections around the planet right now, people want folks of action in power, not ones that sit back and study. In Canada, look, any major issue has been studied to death. The Ledane Commission in 1975 recommended legal marijuana, and look how long that took. All those studies have been done. Any excuse of government, anytime they don't want to do something, it's always, well, let's study it. That means no.
Yeah, exactly. Or, they kind of dilly-dally. The Massey Tunnel is a great example, right? So, the NDP come out, they announce that they're going to stall the Massey Tunnel replacement project, and they're going to get an independent study. Now, you and I know there have been thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of study done on that tunnel, done on the options. But, they're going to do one more. So they do it, and now it's been sitting on Claire Trevina's desk, the transportation minister, for 7 months. And no one can get a hold of this copy of this report to see what it recommends, which of course leads you and I to believe that, in all likelihood, it says build a new tunnel or build a new bridge, and that the Liberals probably had it right. But that's, what governments do, right? They study things to death, they kick the can down the road, and they hope that, by the time everything happens, that they've moved on to the public has moved on to other issues.
We'll have more with Jordan Bateman right after this.
I'm Greg Johnston, CEO of Carl Data Solutions, an industrial Internet of Things company that provides big data solutions for monitoring critical infrastructure. Carl Data offers machine learning and predictive analytics features through our cloud-based applications to deliver key asset-saving operational insights from massive amounts of data. Carl Data trades on the CSE, symbol CRL, and the pink symbol CDTAF. For more details on Carl Data, please visit carlsolutions.com.
Aben Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABNAF. surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines. Abbott's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at abbottresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jordan Bateman. Jordan, how come the BC government didn't have legal pot stores ready to go in every major community in British Columbia on day one? Instead, they opened up with one store in Kamloops, which is a nice little city, but certainly not the hub of the population. And still, we have how many legal stores in British Columbia? How much in government revenue are they missing? And does this just show the government's lack of ability to plan anything properly?
Yeah, look, I don't know, I kind of give government a little bit of a pass on the marijuana stuff simply because it is such a massive public policy shift, and the federal government gave so little direction or information in the formative days of the policy that, the provinces were really scrambling to try to find, every piece of legislation that needed to be changed, every regulation, how to do it. I philosophically disagree that all liquor and all cannabis needs to be sold through, government stores. I think there's a place for the private market to carry that load, and government should regulate, not sell. But at the same time, I am aware, this is a huge policy shift. And, BC government's a little bit slow, but you almost can't blame them given, I just pin more blame on the Trudeau government for, being so slow in getting on with it and forcing the provinces and a lot of these municipalities to lag.
Yes, the confusion around the issue. I know, the reason is we want to do it right. I understand that. But they did have several examples in the U.S. where it's legal on how it worked right and where it didn't work right, and maybe have some of those examples. Again, we knew that this policy was going to happen the day Justin Trudeau was elected. We think we could have been a little more prepared.
Is that really true, though?
We know government goes against promises.
Electoral reform, right? We thought that was going to be our last election and first past the post, remember?
Yes.
And that fell by the wayside. So I'm not sure you can make that same kind of guarantee. It actually reminds me of community planning. So, one of the things that you heard in this municipal election is we've got to put the infrastructure in before development happens. Every road, every school, it's got to be in before development happens. The problem with that is, every community in British Columbia has a growth plan and thinks they're going to hit certain growth numbers, but few communities actually do. And so, in Langley and Coquitlam and Surrey and Abbotsford, the really high growth communities, okay, you might be able to make that argument to put the infrastructure in first, and feel fairly confident that the growth will come. In a lot of other communities, that wouldn't happen, and you just end up having taxpayers out of pocket carrying.
I was going to say, isn't China the prime example of that? They've built giant cities, and cities for 600,000 people, and they have 2,000 residents. If you build it, they don't always come.
The 1980s is really what shifted people's minds on this. So, the township of Langley, where I was a 2-term councillor, in the 1980s, they fronted all of the infrastructure for major swaths of Walnut Grove. Now, Walnut Grove now, beautiful, mature neighborhood. Everyone loves it. One of the great, upper middle class neighborhoods in the Lower Mainland. But back then, it was, mainly clay fields and kind of a few ramshackle farms, but not really farming anything. So they put in all this infrastructure in 1980 and 1981, and then the recession hits, interest rates spike, and there's no movement. There's nothing being built. There's no homes being zoned. There's no applications coming in, not for months, but for years. And the township of Langley almost went bankrupt. Same with the city of Surrey, carrying all this cost, all this borrowing on these infrastructure things. So that's when they moved to this model where, we'll build it as the development occurs and take the money out of developer cost charges in order to do it. So, everyone has, sometimes I kind of, in municipal times campaigns, I kind of have a chuckle that people forget their history, and, we think that because the 80s are 30 years ago that could never happen again, but at the same time, look at just what a few, changes in policy have done to the housing market in the Lower Mainland now, where nothing is selling, prices are falling off slightly, And, there just aren't any buyers out in the market thanks to the new stress test rules, the interest rate increases, and the crazy NDP tax hikes.
Yes, about these NDP taxes, did they really have to put in a 20% foreign buyer tax when nobody was buying in the first place? And don't we need that market stimulation to keep a healthy real estate market? Because when real estate takes a dump in Canada, it drags down the entire economy.
Yeah, real estate is one of the reasons why we had multi-billion-dollar surpluses in this province in the past few years. So I'm keenly interested in what the February budget's going to say provincially as far as what money's come in. It's not just property transfer tax, although that's a big chunk of it. It's also the money that comes along with construction. It's money that comes along with land sales and all the different other ways that they reach their hands into people's pockets. So, yeah, if you're Carol James, I bet she's sweating some of these numbers, wondering if this whole idea of affordability really is that smart. It sounds better in theory than when you're actually holding the purse strings trying to make everything work.
We'll have more with Jordan Bateman right after this.
Arctic Star Exploration, operated by a team of proven mine finders, is focused on diamonds in Finland and the Northwest Territories of Canada. Work programs are underway in Finland and Canada. Arctic Star trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol ADD, on Frankfurt symbol 82A1, and the OTCQB symbol ASDZF. Please visit our website arcticstar.ca or call us at 604-689-1799.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Jordan Bateman. Jordan, you noticed something very interesting in Washington State in the elections that were held the other day.
Yeah, the carbon tax there went down to defeat again. So, third time that carbon tax has come forward and has been defeated. A few years ago, a revenue-neutral carbon tax, very similar to the BC model, although a little bit lower, came forward to the public. It was voted down, I think, 55-45. Interestingly, some of the environmental groups actually opposed it because they wanted to get their grubby hands on the money rather than having it returned to people in tax cuts. Then the legislature, the state assembly, I guess it's called, in Washington, defeated a carbon tax a year or so ago, decided not to put it in, even though that is a Democratic legislature. And then it went back to the people, so they did another referendum campaign. This time, the money would go to green energy credits. It would go to supporting R&D for green industries, all these different warm and fuzzy things. And it went down to defeat on midterm night as well. So what that means is, of 50 states in the union, only California has any kind of carbon pricing. They have a cap and trade system. Even the greenest of green, leftiest of left jurisdictions like Washington State and Oregon have rejected carbon taxes. And it kind of makes you wonder, given the political climate, and Justin Trudeau taking a lot of shrapnel for wanting to do a national carbon tax, Andrew Scheer, Jason Kenney, Brad Wall, Scott Moe in Saskatchewan fighting back against it. Makes you wonder, BC for a long time has prided ourselves as being the leaders because we have a carbon tax. But if no one is actually following, are you actually leading? And what really is now is a drag on competitiveness. And it might be time for British Columbia to say, look, either everyone does this carbon tax or we get out of this carbon tax business.
Well, how much greenhouse gas does Canada, as the coldest nation in the world, contribute? And we also have the greatest distance between our cities, probably even the greatest distances to commute to work in the world.
Yeah, about 1.5%, I think, was of the total emissions come from Canada. That includes the, evil oil sands. Note my sarcasm. We're like, if you had a swimming pool, you're talking about taking a cup of water out of it. Very little of it actually has to do with us. And look, we've paid a lot. British Columbians have paid a lot to have the moral authority on carbon taxes. And yes, we've had nice write-ups in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times for our innovative carbon tax. But again, if no one's following you, you're not a leader. And what we are doing now is hamstringing our economy. Makes you wonder. It's another competitive advantage for Washington State. And if these Americans aren't going to go along with it, if the rest of Canada is rebelling against carbon taxes, are we as British Columbia taxpayers willing to stand alone and pay carbon taxes when no one else in North America is?
Well, also the 4 provinces that resisted carbon taxes have been told their citizens will get rebates because of it. Well, what about us that have been paying it for a decade? Do we get a rebate for all that time?
Well, see, here's the problem. The NDP have changed our carbon tax so it's no longer carbon neutral. So this national carbon tax would only apply in provinces that don't have carbon taxes, which is everyone but us. We suffer through and we'll see $5 a year increment, $5 per ton increases. That's about 2 cents a liter on your gas every single year under the deals negotiated by the Greens and the NDP.
John Horgan says 2 cents a liter more for gasoline isn't that much, but we already pay the highest prices in Canada. And what if you're a small businessman with 5 or 6 vehicles? What does that 2 cents a liter mean to you?
Well, it adds up quick. And, look, if it was 2 cents a liter and our gas taxes were only 20 cents, all right, you might be able to stomach it. But our gas taxes are 51 cents a liter in this province, highest in North America. Now they're going to increase it 2 cents a liter on March 31st, April 1st. They're going to add on to that another cent and a half of TransLink tax. So, our gas is going to go up 3.5, almost 4 cents a liter on April 1st. So much for all this nonsense about affordability. They certainly don't want to make life more affordable for the people driving their trucks to work or for the families driving their kids to hockey or school and other places.
Overall, how would you describe the business climate in British Columbia right now?
I think it's on pins and needles. Things are still okay, but we're starting to see, some warning signs. We're starting to hear some, concern from, business owners. It's been on the right track for a long time, and, suddenly it's the brakes are failing, and you're beginning to wonder, exactly what will happen here. So, yeah, there's a lot of concern about 2019, even more concern about 2020. There's a lot of eyebrows being raised at some of the decisions and the way it's impacting tax revenues and what that will mean for the NDP's very high spending platform. I would say there's some nerves. There's definitely some nerves.
We have the federal government saying they want to end poverty in Canada by 2030. I remember Jean Chrétien saying back in the 90s they would end child poverty by, I think it was either 1995 or the year 2000. Well, that never happened. Can governments set goals like that? And could one of the ways to do it actually up your personal tax exemption at both the provincial and federal levels to say something livable like $25,000 or $30,000 a year before you pay any tax?
Yeah, I mean, that's one option.
Let people have money in their hands before you start taking it out, before they've fed the kids,
I think we got to start looking at where the poverty actually exists in Canada and being very clear about it. And, it is places like First Nations reserves that have not been well managed. We know millions of dollars have been transferred, are transferred every year to various First Nation reserves. Money does not always get down to clean water and services and housing for the people it's supposed to serve. So that's one part of it. For some, it's the tax exemption would help. Look, any incentive you can give people to work, to have a good job and to continue to improve themselves is going to help you with your poverty index. But as an aspirational goal, it sounds great. I always do wonder, right, though, some poverty indexes basically put, you say the bottom 15% of people are quote unquote poor, no matter what the actual income levels are. So you do want to make sure that you're actually, tracking this properly and that it is a reasonable goal. And look, if everyone has more money, that does increase the cost of everything, which again, makes it even harder to hit those kind of arbitrary targets.
Is it important for governments to build social housing, a business they got out of in the late 90s to help balance the federal budget? I mean, that's good for the construction industry, isn't it? Yeah, look,
we'll build stuff, but whether it's government building or private market building really doesn't matter to construction. Building is building to us. the key is, if you have private partners, like make it attractive for private enterprise to take all the risk in this. Why put the risk on taxpayers when you can try to make it more attractive for the private sector to do it? That to us makes more sense than having government
tax incentives and so on.
Yeah, tax incentives, cutting red tape, maybe making some of these projects go to the front of the queue in order to get done. Those are the ways to encourage more housing stock to be built, not adding more red tape or having, having every, proposal go through John Horgan's desk or something like that.
Why do you think it takes years to get a building permit in Vancouver, but if you go to some small outlying community, it's so much faster? Is it just the size of the city, or are they understaffed? Do you have any idea? Partly size. If you come in and do a development in Little Langley City, for example, 20,000 people, they're thrilled to death to have you, so they're, bending over backwards to do it. Vancouver, there's that kind of, Vancouver City Hall, there's that snooty, well, if you don't do it, someone else will anyways, it's not like any piece of land in Vancouver is ever going to be, left alone. So that is problematic. It's interesting to see what's happening in Vancouver, and I'm not sure Kennedy Stewart's the guy to fix it. Proportional representation, people in British Columbia now have their mail-in ballots or should by now. What's your thoughts on it? Yeah, I voted for first past the post and then put it back in the mail. I left the second question blank, one and done. I don't believe any of these three systems are fleshed out enough for anyone to give approval to. There's no maps, there's no rules. We're trusting politicians to come up with them. I say no thanks. And for me, I look at the way Canada is developed, the way British Columbia is run, and I think, what's the problem we're trying to fix here? We have a great economy, we're a, just state, we're kind, we're generous, we have, even when we switch governments to the NDP or back and forth, we do it with a ballot, not a bullet. I just don't see what the problem is with this tried and true system that we need to fix. First past the post obviously is not perfect. There's little tweaks here and there you can make, but the things that are being promised by the prop rep people are utterly false. And we know that prop rep does not create extremism, but it certainly, harbors it, gives extremist parties and fringe parties and crazy folks a chance to worm their way into positions of power. I, for one, am not interested in that. The proponents could give very few examples of where it's worked out well. Can you give examples of where it hasn't? Yeah, look, Belgium went 600 days without a government. Northern Ireland's into their second year without a government. Sweden's gone 90 days without a government. Germany, you've had the German government have to make deals with basically far right, almost neo-Nazi type people in order to have enough seats to govern. All through Europe, there's examples of fringe, extreme left or extreme right parties, racist parties, getting little bits of power and being able to grow their influence election after election. That is not great. It's not something we should be looking to mimic. What about the politicians who say, Canada doesn't have these radical groups? We've had them in the past. Wouldn't this actually help them form if they thought they had some hope of influencing the acting government? Yeah, if we don't have these radical groups, it means first past the post has worked. It's shut them down. Yeah, exactly. So they'll find a way. They'll get together. They'll find each other. And then they'll slowly start to grow, and before you know it, we'll have trouble. Look, if you don't think there's going to be an anti-immigration party, you're crazy. And if you don't think there's going to be, regional parties, there absolutely will be. There'll be social conservative parties. There'll be communist parties. There'll be all sorts of wild ideology going on, and all of which, all they have to do is get 5% of the vote, and then all of a sudden they have 4 seats. And in a splintered parliament, that might be enough to put them in the position of power to decide who should be the next premier. We don't want that. Stick with what works. It's tried and true. It's not like these examples have been fleshed out. The NDP and Greens took the shortcut, tried to rig the referendum instead of giving us a system to vote on that was actually well thought out and examined and considered by experts and independent people. Jordan, thank you so much for chatting with us. Thanks for having me. My guest has been Jordan Bateman, Communications Director for the Independent Contractors and Business Association. Their website, icba.ca. If you have any questions for Jordan or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.